Good morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, you name it. Look for us and you'll find us. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And to that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Walter Beals. And Walter, you can feel free to wave to all you fans and friends who are watching this. And
Hello,
that is
fans.
okay, and that is the amazing Walter Beals. I've known Walter, I don't know, a good 10 plus years.
Yeah,
And I've known him, I have to mention, Walter, aside from what we're going to be talking about on the show today, I first met you in terms of your juggling career. And so in another life, you were and still are a juggler?
I am still a juggler. I
Okay,
have at least 3 or 4 gigs coming up in October.
okay. And
So still active juggler.
And I've spoken to you about your juggling career, which is just
Yeah,
amazing. But what I found cool about you is that all of a sudden you told me, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so, that you got into now something new, and all of a sudden you became a drone operator. Is that correct?
that is correct, Blaine. I bought my first drone probably 2 years ago and started playing around with it, and quickly realized the potential of them as a tool for an artist to capture imagery from just about any perspective you can think of. Like, you can be up high, you can be down low, you can be zipping across the grass. It's amazing what these drones can do. So yeah, I really fell in love with them.
What got you interested in it?
What got me interested in it?
Yeah.
Well, I like toys and I like tools. And when toys and tools combine into one thing, that's like the perfect thing in my opinion. So a drone is both, in my opinion, can be both a toy and a tool. It's a toy because it's something that you get to fly, and that takes you back to your childhood dreams of just making things go through the air. And at this point, you get to have the perspective of being inside the drone, flying with it, which is amazing. Um, and then it's a toy, it's also a tool because it can be used to document serious things. Like, it can document well, like I'm documenting these barns that are slowly disappearing in our landscape. But drones are used for all kinds of things, like working on saving people who are stranded out in the forest. If you need to find someone, they're used for search and rescue and all kinds of things like that.
When did you get your first drone?
I'm sorry, when did I get my first
Yeah.
drone? I got my first drone probably about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and I bought an inexpensive one that was like this Chinese knockoff of a nicer drone, and I ended up putting it in a tree like within the first 3 hours of getting the thing. And despite having it in the tree, I was immediately hooked and wanted to go out and buy another drone. And eventually, I started getting nicer drones with like this DJI Mavic Air 2, which is my nicest drone that I have right now, which is where most of my footage comes from. This drone right here.
Well, we'll show it. Can you lift it up
Sure.
or?
Yeah, this is the Mavic Air 2, and it's got a really nice camera. The cool thing about this camera, if you can see, it's on a gimbal. So whenever it's not turned on right now, but whenever it's turned on, if the drone is pitching forward, the camera levels out. So when you're flying, your drone may be pitching forward like this, but all of your footage looks like you're just floating through space, which is
So,
really fascinating. Yes.
so back to the first drone. So you bought it 3 hours, and then after it went in the tree, that was it. You couldn't use it again.
Well, it was stuck in the tree, and I tried and tried to get it to come out, and it didn't come out. Trees eventually shake things out of them. That's what they do. A good wind, and it eventually came down. But before it came down, I had already bought a second drone of the same make and model. So actually, it's funny because those two are my oldest and most broken down drones. They're in my basement in a box in pieces right now, so I don't use them anymore.
So you still
But
have it though.
yeah,
So
my first proper drone that I bought was the DJI Mini, which is this one right here. Which, the nice thing about this is it's completely portable. You can fold the little wings out like this, and they fold out. So this is something that's small enough that you can fold down and fit into your backpack. And if you're going out hiking, you know, you're out on a trail, you pull this thing out of your backpack, pull your phone out, hook your phone up to the controller like this, and you can send it up 200 feet and see what the trail ahead of you looks like.
How many drones do you have?
Currently, I have 2 mini drones. This Mavic 2. I have this little tiny toy drone, which has got, surprisingly enough, this is called an Fpv Drum, which has got this little tiny camera on it. I don't have it on me right now, but I've got a pair of goggles that I wear when I'm flying this one, because it moves so quickly in first-person view. You want to be able to see it up in front of your eyes like that. And then this one right here is actually one that I'm in the process of building. You can see all the wires and the circuit boards and stuff like that. I've been learning how to solder, which is not something I was very good at before, and I'm just starting to get better at it. So this is a drone that I'm in the process of building. It's not done yet. This is, because it's a homemade drone, instead of using a commercial controller that comes with that specific drone, this is just like a generic controller. This is a Radiomaster, is a TX16S. This is actually the same controller that someone who does RC airplanes would use to control their airplane. So something like this can be used to control a drone or an RC airplane. So there's a lot of technical stuff that I'm still learning as I go.
So when you're doing the drone, you come out, you have the drone, it's flying, and you bring this controller with you. Is that how you operate it?
Yeah. So so for example, on October 1st, this Saturday at sunrise, I'm going to be out in Sandy Mush, and I'm going to be standing in front of a barn, and I'm going to take this drone right here. There's a button here at the top, which is the power button, and I'll set it down somewhere where it'll be flat and it can take off. And then this device right here has 2 joysticks on it, and it connects to this screen right here. So this is the controller. This is what I use to make the drone fly. And I see on the screen what is being viewed by that camera there. And I'm recording all of that, all that imagery, I'm recording onto a micro SD card, which fits in that tiny little slot. So something no bigger than a thumbnail carries just hours of amazing, beautiful, scenic footage of barns.
Talk, Walter, about how do you learn this? In other words, did you pick this up by reading a book or on YouTube, or how do you learn this?
So there are a lot of YouTube videos that teach you how to fly a drone. The basics of flying a drone is, and I can show anyone really quick. Let me hold this basic controller up. We can see that pretty well, right?
Right.
We have 2 joysticks here. They both go up and down and left and right. Up and down and left and right. This one right here, if you press it up, it makes the drone rise. If you pull it down, it makes the drone go down. If you make it go left or right, the drone will rotate or yaw, as they say. And so that's for this joystick. And this one is all about movement. So if you push it forward, the drone pitches forward and goes forward. If you pull it back, the drone pitches backward and goes back. If you go left or right, the drone pitches either left or right. So between these two, you're controlling the drone, doing all these things about turning and going forward, up and down. So that's how you're using these 2 controllers to control the drone.
Before you got into putting up your first drone, had you used to play video games, or were you into joysticks and all that stuff?
Oh yeah, of course, yes. I'm from the 80s. We've been playing video games since the 80s.
Yeah, because I never did, because you're showing me joysticks, so I can just see it. So this was easy for you to pick up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It must have been very exciting. You talk about the one that crashed. It must have been so exciting for you the very first time you got the drone to see it go up in the air. Was that like, it's like Lindbergh, the Wright brothers. Did it feel like that?
It was pretty exciting to know that I was controlling something like that. And I mean, I've seen drones over the years and I only just recently got interested in them. I remember seeing them in the past, and I think I've bought some smaller drones in the past that I would just open up and turn on and it would just slam into the wall. And the technology now is increased so much that this actually has GPS in it. So if I send it up and I send it out, half a mile away from me, and I somehow, like, maybe something gets just disconnected from my radio and I completely lose contact with this, it's smart enough to go, oh, I've lost contact. I'm going to go home. So it'll go up, it'll go straight up 180 feet or whatever I tell it to, and then it'll turn around and fly back to where it took off from using GPS, and it will land within a foot and a half of where it took off from.
Now, when you fly these drones,
Yes, sir.
you have to be, I guess, by yourself, or you can't. Can there be other drones up in the air at the same time?
There are a lot of regulations for flying drones, which is why I ended up studying for and getting my FAA 107 certification for flying. And with the FAA 107, which is from the Federal Aviation Administration, I'm now able to fly drones commercially. And the nice thing about going through that whole process is I learned all the rules and all the safety measures of how to fly. And there's definitely things that people should be aware of. This kind of technology is available to just about anybody. So we have to create rules and regulations when flying, because any Yahoo could get a drone like this and just fly it. You end up having a lot of power with something like this, because you can be anywhere and you can look anywhere. And there's a lot of people who abuse that kind of power, and it always bothers me that people do that, because I want drone pilots to be viewed positively. And there's a lot of anger towards drone pilots because people feel a violation of their privacy, which I totally get. If I was sitting in my property and I saw a drone flying over me, I would be very angry about that. So I always try to be a good representative of the drone community by following all the rules and respecting people's privacy, which I think is super important.
But the problem, as you're pointing out, I guess, is that anybody could buy a drone online or however you buy it, and then you don't have to get a license to fly it. You can do it on your own.
So here's the situation. If you're going to be, you don't have, I mean, you can do stuff illegally and you could get caught, and the FAA could give you hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines if they wanted to. They could be very aggressive with their fines. If you want to follow the rules, there's two things you have to consider. One is your intention of flying, and also the weight of the drone. So first of all, this drone right here, they boldly write the weight of the drone on it right here. 249 grams is how much this drone weighs. At 50 grams, this is 249 grams. At 50 grams, or 250 grams, sorry, you have to, anything heavier than this, you have to register with the FAA so that they know that you're flying a larger drone. Anything smaller, this size and smaller, they consider a toy, so they're not worried about it. Now, what is registering your drone? It's just a matter of paying $5 and putting your information on their website so that they know that you have that drone. So this drone right here is registered with the FAA. This one, I can register with the FAA, but I'm not required to because of its size. Now, if I attach anything to this drone, which I can, for example, I can put propeller guards on it, that will make it heavier, and then I would have to register that. So the weight of it determines if you need to register for your drone. Now, what your intention of using the drone determines whether or not you have to have a license. If you're just a guy who wants to go out in the forest or, shoot some pretty scenes and stuff like that, and that's just for your own personal enjoyment, no need to get a license. But the second you do any kind of business with your drone and your drone footage, even if it's doing volunteer work for a nonprofit organization, the FAA says you're required to pass their 107 certification. So those are the two main regulations for the FAA. Is if it's over a certain weight, you have to register your drone, and if you're doing any kind of commercial work with a drone, you have to pass their pretty difficult test of getting this 107 regulation or 107 certification. It's interesting because that test, like 80% of the test are questions that they would be asking a regular pilot who was getting their license.
And let's use what you just said, Walter, to segue into now what you're using these drones for. Because when you told me you were getting to this flying drones, I thought that was kind of interesting. Then I became more interested when you put it all together, and all of a sudden you came up with the idea to now start shooting pictures of barns. And
Yep.
how'd you come up with that idea?
Well, I'll tell you what, a little bit more about myself, Blaine. I work in the public defender's office in the courthouse. I've been working for the state of North Carolina for now 14 years. And I'm at the point where you don't want to let go of a state job if you've been there that long. You kind of want to ride it out to the end. And I figure in about 10 years from now, I will be at a point in my life when I'm basically retiring. I'll still be early 60s, a young guy ready to make some more money. And I've decided that one of the ways that I want to make money after I'm done working for the state of North Carolina is working as a drone pilot, because I think that there's a lot of work and potential for creativity, which is where I like to take my work, is in the creative realm for doing this kind of work as a source of income after I've left the state of North Carolina. Of course, I'll also be doing other jobs, like I work as a professional juggler, as you mentioned, and I also do live casting, and I do prop building for theater and movie companies. So there's going to be lots of things, but drones are just one more thing to throw into my tool belt of ways to make money after I've stopped working for the state. So that said, I wanted to pick a project that would help me build my skills and experience as a drone pilot, so that when I'm ready to start making money, which I am right now, I will have something to show the world of my skill level and my artistic ability.
And to show the world, if you will, or whoever's watching this podcast or listening to it, you developed one, I guess you call it promo piece, but it knocked my socks off when I saw it the other day. And you want to just give an introduction to what you'll be showing?
Sure, yeah. Actually, I put this together because I knew I was coming to this interview and I wanted to have something to show, and something that showed a collection of the various shoots. I've been on 13, or this weekend will be my 14th barn shoot, which I only started at the beginning of this, early this year in January, February, around there. It was in the wintertime. So you'll see my first video. If you go to my YouTube channel, the first video is barns and snow. But yeah, so I've got about 13 videos so far. So I wanted to just do a compilation of some of my favorite shots, but I also asked a friend to come along to my last barn shoot and get some video footage of me actually doing what I do, so that I could weave that into this little promo video showing a little bit of the background scene of me doing these barn shoots.
By the
And
way,
if you like, I can show you that video.
I would have you in just a second, but one other question. So when you're shooting a barn video, not the one you're going to show us, but in general, how long does that take you?
So this drone right here, if I grab here and pull this out, this is a battery that goes in the drone. I have 3 of these batteries. So when I show up, I have 3 batteries to burn through. Each battery will give me about 25 to 30 minutes of flight time. So I generally use up all 3 batteries when I'm there. So I'm talking at least an hour and a half of flying. And then there's, getting there, meeting the people, chatting with them, getting to know about their farm and their barn and their history and stuff like that. I end up usually spending about 2.5 to probably 2 to 2.5 hours each shoot so far.
And then after that, when you get back or editing it, that takes what, another 3 times?
Yeah, I probably put another 3 to 4 hours into a video that I edit from beginning to end. I've got to upload all the videos, and I'm using an online service to do my video editing because I don't have a powerful enough computer these days to do video editing at home. So that's the nice thing about this modern age we live in. You can just upload your footage onto a website, do the editing on a web page, and then you let their computer do all the heavy lifting. And then when they're done, they email you a link to the file that you download, which works great.
Very cool. And so we're talking about it then, Walter, could you just introduce then this promo video you're going to show?
Yep. This is about 2 minutes long, just a little bit over 2 minutes long. And again, this is a compilation of a bunch of different barns that I've been to, and just a little bit of dialogue about who I am and what I'm doing. So would you like me to pull that up now?
If you would, please.
All right, let's see what we can do here.
Hello, my name is Walter, and this is Barns of WNC. I created this project to build my skills and experiences as a cinematic drone pilot and to document the many rustic, historic old barns scattered throughout the mountains of western North Carolina. Having lived many years in this area since the mid-'80s, I've been aware of these beautiful wooden barns. I would see them on drives out into the countryside. They always seemed a mystery to me, a glimpse into the past. Lately, I've learned the sad truth that many of these old structures are vanishing due to neglect or from being torn down and their salvaged lumber being sold as accent wood for new million-dollar homes. 2 years ago, when I first discovered quadcopter drones, I was hooked. I found them to be both a lot of fun to fly and a valuable tool for an artist capturing imagery from almost unlimited perspectives. I am an FAA 107 certified drone pilot. This certification from the Federal Aviation Administration allows me to legally fly drones for commercial purposes. The knowledge I gained from that certification process has helped me become a safe, law-abiding, respectful drone pilot. I am really enjoying this project. I invite you to browse the videos on this YouTube channel, and please subscribe if you would like to see more of this content in your feed. Thank you.
Welcome back. Anyway, that's very cool. So talk a little bit about then the fact that you've done how many barns now?
So I've done 13 shoots, if I'm doing the math right. I have one in the can right now that I still need to edit. Actually, the very last shot of the video that you just watched that had the horses running towards the barn, that was a shot that I quickly pulled in from my shot this last Saturday, which I have not yet edited, so that will be coming out soon, probably in the next 3 or 4 days.
What's the reaction of people when you go to their barn to do this shoot?
Well, honestly, one of the very first barns that I shot, when I sent the video to the family who had invited me out to shoot their farm, they quickly let me know that I had them in tears from the video that they watched, because it was such an emotional thing for them to see, because of their attachment to the property and just seeing it from that new perspective. And of course, I like to throw in some nice music into it, which affects the mood as well when watching something.
Well, that's pretty cool. You probably get similar reaction to most people when they see their barns photographed like this.
Most people are very proud of their barns and their property, so they're very happy about it, and they end up sharing it with all their friends. So I'm getting probably most of my views from family and friends of each individual barn. So it's interesting to see how many views each video has, because of, some people I think are less inclined to be on the internet, especially when you get out into the country, there's not a whole lot of internet out where these barns are.
Well, what's so cool about this project, Walter, as you're describing it, it kind of brings everything together, what you do, in terms of entertaining people and telling a story. And I'm thinking, you mentioned it earlier, had the same reaction. Remember you did a couple of years ago some hand casting, and and same exact reaction. Brought people to tears. To the one couple you did, elderly couple, and it's just such a story that it was just a beautiful thing to do. And so it seems like people are having a similar reaction to this latest project. That
I think people are enjoying it. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone can appreciate the aesthetic value of these barns out in the country, and I think it's important to bring awareness to them, because, as I mentioned in the video, a lot of them are disappearing off the landscape, because of neglect, or because they're getting torn down. Sometimes, a family may be financially struggling, and it makes sense to them to tear down a barn so that they can sell the wood, and it gets recycled and used in construction in these $1 million homes as accent wood. It's a shame that that's what's happening to some of these barns. So this, in a way, for me, is a way to document these, hopefully before that happens. But I feel like a lot of these barns that I've been recording are being taken well care of by the people that are there. So not worried about those barns. It's the other ones that I see off in the distance.
how many more barns are you going to photograph?
I don't know. Every time I put out a video, showing the next barn I've shot, I get 2 more people offering me to come out to their place to shoot their barn. I feel like this could probably continue for the rest of my life if I wanted it to. But I imagine this will be at least a 2-year project, that I wrap up at some point and move on to something else.
Well, like you said, we could do after North Carolina, we could then go to South Carolina, we could go, barns of everywhere. I didn't realize there were that many barns out there that you could photograph.
I joke and say that, after I'm done with the barns, I was going to move on to churches, because churches are another thing that you can
Wow.
find out in the country that look really cool.
Yeah,
And
and I think churches,
benefit from those.
I think they would love,
Yeah.
somebody to shoot the church and see different angles. Wow, I hadn't realized that. So talk a little bit about that after you do this for a year or two, or as you're doing this, what are other uses that you can have for your drones? In other words, you have a collection of drones there, and
Yep.
it's kind of a hobby, I guess, still. You're doing these photographs of the barns and churches. I love that idea. What else can you use the drones for? What are some of your future plans?
Well, if you're looking for ways to make money as a drone pilot, one of the probably two easiest ways that you can make money as a drone pilot is working for a real estate agent,
Right?
doing aerial photography of property. And so a drone like this would be good at flying around a house, but they're starting to make these smaller drones and people wear the FPV goggles where they fly through a house. And
I've seen that. Yeah.
Smooth fly through the houses and stuff like that. So there's that. And I'm actually, I met this young woman who is starting a real estate business, and she came to me because she was trying to learn how to fly a drone, and I've been coaching her how to fly. And she and I have been talking about, starting to do a little bit of business together, because she needs someone to help her, when she gets into flying and doing real estate business that way. The other thing that's a really big business for drone pilots is doing things like events, like specifically weddings are very popular, where you have an outdoor wedding and you can just have a drone just casually on the outskirts while flying around, getting these nice views. And but I mean, again, there's a lot of amazing things that they're doing with you. This drone right here is quite small, but they are making drones that are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and more intelligent and automated, to the point where, imagine this, if a building were to collapse from an earthquake, they at some point will be able to make a drone that will be able to fly into the cracks and crevices of that collapsed building looking for people and finding them and then landing next to them and communicating with them that they've been found and that someone's going to try to get to them. Imagine that kind of technology is amazing.
As a result of this work, did you ever have a desire to fly a plane then, or fly bigger items?
Yes. When you learn to, especially taking the FAA license, you really get a glimpse of what the world of being a pilot might be like, and it's one of those things that I can think about, but I don't think that I will ever probably go for, because you're talking about a large commitment, not of just time, but money. I've spoken with a number of private pilots, and a lot of them will get their license. They'll reach a point where they can get their license. They'll do some flights, and then they kind of have to let it go because it's not a practical thing for the average person.
Well, I was just thinking out loud as you said you show your drones, and yeah, I imagine if you were to show in another show your planes, it'd just be a little bit more expensive than buying a drone,
Right.
And then you have to you have to find a place to park the plane and whatnot.
Right.
It's a full-time thing unto itself. Anyway, Walter Beals, this was as always a pleasure. Folks who want to find out more about your drone business, in terms of you doing it, and I could see it'd be such a cool thing to have a wedding shot, or something else. Best way to reach you is what?
Well, if you are on YouTube and you're watching my videos, you can use the email address that's associated with that project, which is barnesofwnc@gmail.com, and you will have seen it at the end of the video that we just watched. I have the contact for that Gmail. Currently, I do not have a website for my drone business itself because I'm just getting started. But if people want to contact me and they're interested in my services, I am available for hire, and I can do a large number of projects, anywhere from just, for example, I recently had a woman who wanted me to come out and fly around her property and just videotape her lilies because they were blooming and she was excited about them and wanted me to document them. And that was a job that I got paid for. So there's all kinds of different jobs. I can take video of your property, of your events. I can do just photographs. There's all kinds of things you can do with a drone. So if you want to contact me, yes, please reach out to me through barnesofwnc@gmail.com. And that'd be a great way to add to your collection of interesting photographs and video of your life.
And I'd just like to add to what Walter said, that in terms of if you ever contact Walter, he's just a real pleasure to work with. And wherever he does, and I've done a couple of things with you, Walter, you do it very well. So I'm so excited about this latest venture because it's certainly different, or for me, and thank you for teaching me a little bit about the drone business. So
Absolutely.
okay, so hopefully we'll speak to you or actually bump into you in the near future, buddy.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Thanks for chatting with me.
Okay, thanks again, Walter. As always, a pleasure. Speak to you soon. Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
And as Walter kind of disappears, or I'll get rid of him, I'll be looking for our next guest, and hopefully there he is. Perfect timing. And as our next guest works his way into the studio, I'd like to mention that you're watching or listening to the Blaine's World podcast, and we're here a couple times a week usually at, I guess best bet is just go to the blainesworld.net website, and you'll see all the podcasts we have up and running. My next guest is somebody by the name of Ken Butcher. And Ken, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. So
Hi there.
that's Ken Butcher. And Ken grew up in Washington, D.C. and grew up in northern Ohio. His father was an avid science fiction fan and taught him the love of reading. He moved to North Carolina with his wife and 3 sons 32 years ago to start a research lab for a local company where he was awarded 16 U.S. patents. His first book, The Middle of the Air, was published in 2009. But before we even talk about your books, Ken, I guess I knew of you through another thing you were doing in your life. You also ran an ice cream store. Is that correct?
My wife did. I helped her out a little bit from time to time. She owned a
Okay.
killing store on Main Street in Hendersonville.
Okay, and that must have been a shift for you to be making.
Oh, that was fun.
Was it?
That
Yeah.
that was a very fun business. People came in a good mood, ready to give themselves a treat, and it was just a really pleasant place to be.
And you raised a good point, and I agree with you completely. And I just had a discussion with somebody about this point, that you would think that people going into an ice cream store, for the most part, are in a good mood, or you're going
That's
from a
right.
smile on their face. And let's kind of segue that into talking about this other thing you've gotten into a couple of years ago. All of a sudden, you became an author. And let me ask you this: as a kid, where did you grow up again? Was it in?
Mostly in Northern Ohio.
Okay. And so, do
Born
you
in
know
DC, but grew up in Ohio.
when you were growing up as a kid in Ohio, did you always know you wanted to be an author?
I did.
Did you
From
really?
pretty early age. Because like I said, my dad got me into reading pretty early, and I loved it. I've read all my life, and it was always something I wanted to try to do. And a few years ago, I finally decided, if I'm going to do this, I better do it. And
Yep.
so I did.
Now, before that, had you ever written anything?
Well, as an engineer and a
Right.
researcher, I did a lot of technical writing. And I wrote some stories for the kids, but this was the first fiction writing I've done.
So the other writing you'd done, had it ever been published anywhere?
Oh, the technical stuff,
Well,
yes.
technical stuff, but I mean, for the kids or anything else?
No,
you
no,
wrote?
I didn't try to publish that.
So what got you then to decide to write your first book?
Well, I knew that I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to write for a long time. And so I started to try to do it. And my intention was to do sort of an outline of the whole book, figure out chapter by chapter what I'll do, and then I would execute it. And it just didn't work for me. A lot of people do write like that. I still would love to write like that, but I don't seem to be able to. And I read this book. It's kind of a breakthrough for me. This book called No Plot, No Problem. It was one of the guys that, you may have heard of this organization that you accept the challenge of writing a novel in 1 month.
I've seen that, yeah.
Well, this is one of the first guys that did that. Now that means 50,000 words for them, which is a pretty short novel, but nevertheless. And his point was, if you have a nice outline and know exactly what you're going to do, that's great. And if you don't, you just work with it anyway. And there's a certain number of words you need to write each day to make it in a month. And you just have to sit down and figure it out. And the fear you have going in is that you'll get in the middle of it and you get stuck. And his point was, you just have to trust yourself that you'll figure it out as you go. And that was sort of a breakthrough for me. I didn't try to do it in 1 month, but I finally figured out sort of a minimum number of words I would write every day, and worked through it and made it pretty religiously day by day, and got my first novel done.
And talk a little bit about that process. So when you sat down, did you get up at 6 o'clock every morning and write for 2 hours or 3 hours, or how'd you do that?
Yeah, about not quite at 6, but more like 7, like 3 hours, or as long as it took me to get. What I finally ended up with was 300 words, which isn't much, but you will crank out a novel in less than a year if you do it at that pace.
What about what you mentioned just before? Did you ever get stuck in writing these 300 words?
I did, and it's interesting. That's where some of the best stuff has come from. When you really don't know what you're doing, and you just have to sit down and just tell yourself, do it. You got to come up with something today.
And talk a little bit about then that first book. So this was a couple of years ago. When did you start writing the first book?
I probably started writing it around 2006, maybe.
Okay.
It came out in 2009.
Okay, I don't have the book handy. I don't know if you have it handy, or you do, even better. But just
Yeah, that's the middle of the air. This one right here.
okay. So
They
talk
did
a
a
little.
super job on the cover there.
Okay, talk about that book though. Where did you get the idea to write that one?
Well, I knew that there were certain qualities that I wanted it to have. I love books that use the setting as a very important part of the story. Some of my favorite writers do that. Tony Hillerman and then his daughter Ann Hillerman is a good example of that. So I knew I wanted to set in Western North Carolina. And being a technical person, I hung around engineers and researchers all my life, so it was bound to have some of those people in it. Then I realized Western North Carolina has beautiful mountains and streams and waterfalls and hiking trails. And so a lot of that was in the book. But I also realized that there were some important technological sites here. One of them being the Perry site up west of here that has radio telescopes. I don't know if you've ever been there, but they're really cool looking telescopes, big dishes. And then there's also Oak Ridge National Labs, which I did a little bit of work with. So it occurred to me to start incorporating those elements in. And pretty soon I came up with the idea of the government doing a secret project with nuclear materials that they weren't supposed to do. It involved trucking materials between a lab in South Carolina to Knoxville, and one of the trucks disappears near Hendersonville. And so the government's going crazy looking for it, but they can't be too overt because they're not supposed to be doing the project. And so the plot sort of evolved from there. There was a kind of interesting family called the Colebrookes, who were very ingenious and interesting family. One of them owned a chocolate store on Main Street. And so suspicion falls on that family, and it kind of goes on from there.
Somebody once told, or actually a writer friend of mine once told me the one nice thing about writing is that you get to also kill off anybody who annoyed you or upset you. Or you mentioned
Right.
this family, the Colbert family. So I don't know where you get your names from, but that's a good way to get back at people. If
Right.
you're upset with them. So the Colbert family, that was just a family in your imagination. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, it's kind of loosely based on my own family.
Oh, okay. So that's okay. You can say whatever you want about your old family. What was the reaction? So you wrote the book, took you 3 years to get it published. What was the reaction after you got it published?
People seem to like it. People especially loved when that lived around here noticed places that they knew about, so they got a kick out of that. One of the interesting reactions I got was I would have people come up to me and say, "Oh, I see you put me in your book," and I would wonder what character this person thinks he is in the book. It's kind of interesting.
Did you put some people you knew into the book?
Not directly, no.
Yeah.
None of those people that came up to me and said that to me.
Yeah. But that's interesting. So it must be kind of, I guess, the challenge to come up with not only the story, the plot line, but then you have to come up with descriptions of the people, or
Right.
how to write them. But that must be kind of fun. So you wrote the first book, came out 2009, I think you said?
Right.
And then did you write anything after that?
I did. I wrote a book called The Dream of Saint Ursula, which was about the same family. It was about the Colebrook family, only it's set in the Virgin Islands, which is a place I very much like. And the Colebrookes one of them has bought a vacation place down there, and they get into some adventures down in the Virgin Islands.
So it must be pretty cool in terms of doing the research for the book. That gives you the excuse for your next vacation.
That's right. That's right.
So you wrote this book. How long did that book take you to write?
That book took me probably a year to get a first draft, and then a lot of editing and rewriting on that one. So it probably took 3 to 4 years in all.
Now, the editing and rewriting, do you do that, or did you have somebody help you on the editing?
I always have someone help on editing. At least because as a writer, I think it's important to get some outside feedback, because you don't always know the signals you're putting out. You don't know how people are reacting to them. And you almost have to get feedback from out of your own head. So I was lucky enough to know some people that were really insightful about stories and about writing, and they helped me out.
You mentioned your wife before. Do you share stuff with her too?
I do usually when I get the first draft done.
Yeah.
And she's a super proofreader too.
Okay. It's like, my wife does my proofreading, so I'm grateful.
Right.
You have somebody to
Before
do it.
that, my mother-in-law, who's passed away now, but she was a great proofreader because she was a editor for a newspaper
Okay.
in her career. So she could go through the book faster than I could read it and circle everything that was wrong in red ink.
Well, it's a shame you mentioned that because every newspaper, remember years ago, used to have proofreaders, and now copy editors, the whole bit, they're
Right.
gone just about, so
Yeah.
it's a dying art, I guess, but very useful art. Let's segue now into the name of the book. And by the way, we'll talk about the title in a second, but the latest book you have, or the latest book that came out, was As the Crow Dies. I have a copy.
That's it.
And it's, I love you call it, an Asheville mystery. And
Right.
What's, if I can ask you, kind of maybe give the Reader's Digest version of that book.
Okay, that book, it starts out by introducing you to a couple of detectives. The older seasoned guy is named Siegel, and he's been injured and he's been out for a couple of years and just back on the job. So he doesn't have much self-confidence and still a little bit of physical pain. And so they've teamed him up with a very young, dynamic, athletic woman named Dinah. And they're being given sort of the light load of the detective work because they're not quite sure that he's up to anything yet. They find a body in the French Broad River. They assume it's an accident, someone drowned or something. So they go down and they find out not only is it not an accident, it's a murder. And so they start dealing with that. And there's a little bit of hesitancy of whether he's going to be up to the job or not. They find out that this man was working for a company called Creatures of Asheville 2.0, which was actually my original title for the book. And this company specializes in training animals to do things that are quite a bit beyond what you would expect an animal to do. And so these animals, one of the things about the book that makes it fun is these animals keep showing up and doing various things, some of them kind of funny. The main animal that you hear about is Richard the Crow, who's as crows are, very, very intelligent. And it turns out he's actually done some government work to find out about. So anyway, it kind of starts simple and gets more complex and more heavy because they find out not only is it a murder, it's more like a military assassination. And they start getting into that and following the leads, and they find out there's a pretty aggressive and dark military organization behind what's going on and posing a real danger to the city. So being higher and higher until it finally concludes at the end up on the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Now, in coming up with this one, let me ask you, did you, in terms of your research, did you speak to any detectives? Did you speak to any police folks?
I did not. It's all made up from the inside of my head.
Okay, very cool. and it sounds realistic to me. Same thing too with the animals. That's all off the top of your head?
Well, there's crows. There's a murder of crows that live near me. So every time I go out for a walk, I kind of look at, that's one of the things I do is look around. What are the crows doing today? Are they down by the creek or up in the woods? And what are they getting after? And the little bit of research I did do, one of the things that got me going on the plot was I had read a book about how they hunted down Osama bin Laden.
Right.
And the story goes in the book that, which I'm sure is true, that they found this compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. They were pretty sure it was him, but they weren't 100% sure. They couldn't figure out a way to really confirm that it was bin Laden in there. And they didn't want to fly drones like your other guest was on. So they didn't want to fly a drone around because that would give him away, and he could disappear again for another 10 years. And So they didn't want to do that. And they got satellite images, but that wasn't quite clear enough. So I hit upon the idea, what if you put a camera on a crow? And like Richard, we're able to teach him exactly where you wanted him to go and really confirm that was bin Laden there. So that shows up later in the book.
Okay, so it's interesting how you come up with different ideas and weave them into this whole process. And you mentioned earlier that the original name of the book, and I want to ask you about that, how you come up with names for books. So the original name wasn't As the Crow Flies. What was the original name again?
Creatures of Asheville 2.0.
And so what made you switch?
Well, the publisher, the sales group at the publisher said that the title didn't inform the people that it was a mystery, that it was a murder mystery. So they didn't have anything against the title as such, but it just didn't tell you that it was going to be a murder mystery. So that's why they wanted to change it. And then we kicked around about 100 names before we came up with As the Crow Dies.
Well, then you also have, which is cool, especially if you're in Asheville, know of Asheville, then I love that you have an Asheville mystery, so
right.
You kind of hit them over the head that if they can't figure it out,
right.
Here's what it's going to be about.
And the reason we did that is that the publisher wanted to make it a series, one of a series.
Well, that would seem a possibility. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I wrote a prequel to that book called The Crossbow Murders rather. And I'm actually looking for another publisher because the publisher that did this book has gone out of the fiction business. So it's a little awkward. So I had to find another publisher for it.
Okay. And that's, certainly, it really seems like it'd be a natural to have then prequel, but then a follow-up or whatnot,
Right.
The first of, we'll do a Grisham, not a Grisham thing. Who's mystery writers, who, the A to Z, who is the one who writes all the mysteries with A to Z, has 26.
Oh, yeah, I know who you mean. I don't remember
saying,
the name.
So we won't necessarily have 26 of these.
Probably not that many. I write too slowly.
Okay, right slowly, but pretty ambitious on that. In terms of, so you're working on this prequel. Anything else you're working on in terms of writing?
I'm working on a young adult sort of, I guess you'd call it a coming of age sort of romance called La Vaca, which of course is Spanish for the cow. And that takes place in a chocolate and ice cream shop.
So you have some experience on that.
Yeah, that I have done the research on.
Okay, so where do you get your ideas for books?
It comes little by little. I have a sort of a starting idea usually, and then it seems like I have to start writing and getting to know the characters, and it kind of evolves piece by piece like that. And some of happens to me is I will often have some minor characters or what I meant to be a minor character. They really start lighting up in the story and become more major players.
Now, are you doing that right
so
now?
I'm kind of discovering it as I go along.
You mentioned now you have
Yeah,
two projects.
I'm writing on La Vaca right now. Pardon?
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you have two projects going on, but you're writing on the one project, and you're writing
Yeah.
every day on that one project?
Yeah.
And so the nice thing about that book, it'll be, I guess, it won't be as big as the other books.
Probably not. I'm not quite sure. My books tend to, for some reason, I didn't mean this to be this way, but all the books I've written end up being about 92,000 words, plus or minus a couple hundred.
Okay.
So for some reason, that just is what it takes for me to get a story done.
You finish the story at the end. After you've written a story or the book, do you ever go back and kind of rethink it, or that you would have done it differently, or want to edit or modify it at all?
Oh yeah, it usually goes through some pretty major changes in the first rewriting and draft. Like a second draft.
So it takes a while. How many drafts does it take before you become a finished product?
Oh, probably a dozen.
That many?
At least.
Yeah. Anyway, talk a little bit about Ken. So aside from, you've had a couple of different careers. It seems like your original background. We had all a lot of success. I understand, but I was told I have to ask you about this. That in addition to all this other stuff, you're also in the Guinness Book of World Records. Is that true?
That's right. That's right. There was a cookie company here in Hendersonville called Immaculate Baking. I don't know if you ever had seen any of their products.
Yeah.
But the owner of that, I happen to know him, and he hit upon the idea of trying to bake the world's largest cookie, sort of as a publicity thing. And he wanted he was a big fan of folk art. He wanted the proceeds to go to the folk artists. So he had no idea how he would bake this thing. So that kind of fell in my line of expertise. And my sons and myself came up with the idea of how to bake it, how to make an oven that didn't cost $10 million. And we baked a chocolate chip cookie that was 100 feet in diameter. The previous world's record, I think, was like 52 feet. So we thought we wouldn't mess around. We'd just go for the almost double the thing.
And so you were able to do that?
We did.
Yeah. So who ate the chocolate chip cookie?
Well, a lot of people ate the chocolate chip cookie. The idea was that we would do this and break it up and sell it, and that would be a fundraiser for the folk artists, which partially worked and partially didn't. What happened was when we baked it, it rained. And the health department thought there was a possibility that rainwater had gotten in it and could have contaminated it with groundwater, which I don't think really happened. We ate some of it anyway. But we also took some of the same dough and cooked it in a conventional oven, so we sold that.
Okay.
It was a good chocolate chip cookie.
No, it sounds it. So, but you are stop now. Has that record been topped since then?
Oh no, I don't think anyone's attempted that.
So your goal is not to come up with the 200-pound chocolate chip cookie. The next one, you're going to stop.
No,
it?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, that must have been cool. So the Guinness people came out, or you had to document it?
Yeah. There was a guy from Guinness, and there was a guy from sort of a weights and measures kind of outfit that made sure he had his own instruments that took the diameter and the weight and et cetera, and confirmed that everything was as we said.
By the way, as you're talking about this, I'm seeing there's a book there too. I don't know if you see it, but I do, Ken. I mean, it's just a fascinating concept. Or a guy goes to set Guinness World Records or something. I'm telling you, that would be a lot of fun to write. Or, how you come up with the idea. Or it doesn't, the challenge to you would be, it doesn't have to be the cookie. It could be something else.
Could be anything else, couldn't it?
Wouldn't that be fun to talk about? Or take a young adult novel, talk about how a kid wants to get into Guinness World Records. That's his goal in life. And I'll leave it up to you to figure out what kind of record he's going to set.
That's a possibility.
Okay, no, I'm just saying, I'm there. So talk a little bit about, if people want to get As the Crow Dies, what's the best way to get it? The book.
Well, it's in all the local bookstores. It's in Malaprops, which is my favorite independent bookstore around, but also in Barnes & Noble, also on, all the internet outlets.
Okay. If you want to get it, you can get a copy.
Amazon.
Okay. We dare mention Amazon, but people will be able to get it. And if folks want to know more about Ken Butcher, do you have a website, Facebook page, email address?
Yeah, KennethButcher.com, www.kennethbutcher.com. I also have a podcast website. It hadn't been very active lately, but I did some interviews with other local writers, and that's called themiddleoftheair.com, which is the name of the first book, themiddleoftheair.com.
Okay, very cool. And of course, now you're going to be on the BLAINESWORLD podcast. So
absolutely, I'll be famous now.
Okay, or as the crow flies, or whatever, you'll be famous. Anyway, Ken Butcher, I'd like to thank you for being my guest on this edition of the BLAINESWORLD podcast. I'd also like to thank my guest the first half, Walter Beals, and also Cappy Tassetti, my producer. And I did start it, but I look forward to finishing As the Crow Dies. And thank you very much for being my guest on this second half hour of the BLAINESWORLD podcast.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much.
And hope to maybe even eventually meet you in person. That'd be cool.
That would be great.
Okay, good seeing you, buddy. Thanks.
Thank you.